Welcome to an extraordinary sci-fi HFY adventure. In this story, a human named Lucas finds himself caught in an alien experiment that goes far beyond science. As he forms a forbidden connection with three stunning alien scientists, emotions and curiosity collide in ways that no one expected. What happens when the lines between human and alien begin to blur? Watch to discover a thrilling journey of love, discovery, and the unstoppable force of human connection. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. The last thing Lucas Ward remembered was the hum of his laptop, the cold Seattle air seeping through the cracks of his window, and his cat Shadow curling up beside him. 1 second, he was in his bed, the familiar weight of the blankets comforting him. The next, he was somewhere else, somewhere completely alien. His eyes snapped open, his heart pounding as he felt a sharp pain in his skull, as though his brain itself was trying to escape. His skin tingled as if every nerve was screaming in protest. But it wasn't the pain that made him freeze. It was the cold, metallic surface beneath him. He was lying on something hard, smooth, and utterly unnatural. The air around him was thick with a sterile scent that made him gag. Before he could even process where he was, the sound of soft footsteps echoed above him. A voice, calm and detached, cut through the fog in his mind. "Subject is regaining consciousness," the voice purred, like a soothing lullaby, but something in the tone made Lucas's blood run cold. "Vital signs stable." As his vision cleared, Lucas saw them. Three women standing over him, so beautiful, so otherworldly, it was impossible to believe they were real. Their skin was an impossible shade of emerald green, their eyes glowing like two twin suns. They were dressed in white lab coats, their curves so perfect that they could have been sculpted by the gods themselves. Ladies," Lucas croaked, his throat dry and voice trembling. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been some mistake. I don't remember signing up for this experiment." He tried to sit up, but something was wrong. He was naked, completely exposed. One of the women, the tallest of the three, with silver hair braided so intricately it looked like a work of art, raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. "Subject exhibits immediate signs of discomfort." "Fascinating," she murmured, her voice cold and clinical, as if Lucas was nothing more than an object to be studied. Lucas's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't just trapped somewhere unknown. He was part of something bigger. And no matter how much he wanted to deny it, he realized that there was no escape, no way out. "You've been selected," the woman continued, her eyes glinting with an unsettling curiosity, "for a study of human male characteristics. Your cooperation will influence the duration of your stay here." Lucas's mind raced as he struggled to comprehend the situation. The room was sterile, the lights too bright. He felt like an animal in a cage, a specimen under examination. And yet a part of him couldn't help but be intrigued. Who were these women? What did they want from him? And how could he ever escape their grasp? But before he could speak again, the woman's voice cut through his thoughts. "You are not leaving until we understand you fully. You are unlike anything we've seen before." And with that, Lucas knew his life was about to change forever. Lucas couldn't believe what he was hearing. The words echoed in his head, each one more chilling than the last. "You've been selected for the study of human male characteristics." The statement was so cold, so emotionless, it felt like a declaration of something inevitable. Wait a minute," Lucas stammered, his voice shaky. "You're telling me I'm your specimen? What the hell are you doing here?" He tried to sit up, but it was no use. His body was too stiff, too weak, though part of him still struggled against the overwhelming sense of confusion and panic. "No need to worry. It's just a simple test," the tallest of the women, Dr. Maya Klein, said in a tone that was clinical and detached, as though she were explaining something completely mundane. She lifted a small scanning device, light beams dancing across the air, and moved toward Lucas. "We just need to observe your bodily reactions to unfamiliar stimuli." "Is this how you study people?" Lucas shot back, his skepticism thick in his voice. "You just measure how I react to your weird machines?" "Precisely, but it's not just about that," Maya replied, her expression unchanging. "We study physiological reactions, emotional responses, and human adaptability. You humans are incredibly fascinating." Suddenly, a younger woman with paler green skin and a softer gaze looked at Lucas with an almost childlike curiosity. "My name's Ilara. she said gently, her eyes fixed on Lucas with a fascination he couldn't quite shake. "I've never seen a human up close before. Your skin, your body, it all reacts so differently to us." Lucas felt a subtle shift in the air. The way Alara looked at him, her curiosity practically radiating off her, was unnerving. But at the same time, he couldn't help but feel a strange pull in his chest. It was like she was studying him, but at the same time, there was something more. "Alara, focus," Maya's voice cut through the air, stern and commanding. "Let's stay on track. Carla, prepare the initial cognitive assessment." Carla, the woman with darker green skin and golden hair that shimmered with each movement, smiled slightly and stepped toward Lucas. "We're going to start with a basic motor skills test. Just follow my instructions," she said, bringing up a holographic screen that floated in front of Lucas. Shapes and symbols flickered across it. Lucas blinked at the screen, trying to steady his breathing. "What's this supposed to be?" "This is a spatial reasoning test," Carla explained as she moved her hands across the floating display, changing the symbols and shapes. "We want to see how you process information and react to moving objects." Lucas felt like he had entered some kind of twisted science fiction nightmare. "I'm just a programmer, not a guinea pig. This isn't really my thing," he said with a nervous laugh. "We'll see how you handle it," Carla said without missing a beat. "These tests will give us deeper insights into how humans process and adapt to unfamiliar environments." The test began. The images on the screen changed rapidly, shifting from shapes to complex geometric patterns. Lucas had to move his hands in specific directions to match the patterns. Everything around him felt disorienting, but somehow his instincts kicked in. His hands moved swiftly, matching the symbols with ease. "Done already? Faster than we expected," Carla remarked with surprise in her voice. "The way you move and perceive things is remarkable. Humans have abilities we didn't anticipate." Maya remained silent, her eyes narrowing as she analyzed the data. "Record the results. His responses to the moving images are unlike any other species we've studied." "You're quite the specimen, aren't you?" Carla added, her eyes never leaving Lucas. "Your body reacts to each test like you're living in a completely different world." Maya turned her attention back to Lucas, her sharp gaze now tinged with something else. "Was it interest?" "You really are. Intriguing, Lucas. You're not just a subject. You're a question we need to answer. What you can do, how you react, none of this makes sense to us." Lucas, despite his confusion and unease, couldn't help but feel a strange sense of curiosity growing inside him. Could he really unravel the mysteries these alien beings were after? Or was he just a piece in a game far larger than he could understand? As Lucas stood there, still processing the bizarre experiment, Maya motioned for him to step onto a raised platform. The cold, metallic floor beneath his feet sent a chill up his spine, making him feel more like a lab rat than a human being. But the air around him seemed to hum, vibrating with an energy he couldn't quite explain. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. "Step onto the assessment platform," Maya instructed, her voice as calm and detached as ever. Lucas obeyed, but as soon as he placed his foot on the glowing blue circle, the sensation was immediate. A soft pulse of energy rushed through him, and his skin prickled. He couldn't help but shiver. "Is this supposed to happen?" he asked, his voice slightly strained. "It's perfectly normal," Maya replied, though there was something in her eyes that told him she wasn't entirely sure. "We're measuring your body's electromagnetic response. This will help us understand how you interact with external stimuli." Carla, ever the curious one, stepped forward. "Fascinating. Look at his heart rate. It's spiking," she said, her tone filled with excitement. "And his skin temperature is rising. Why is that, I wonder?" Lucas swallowed hard, trying to maintain his composure. "I don't know," he muttered. "Maybe because I'm standing on a glowing platform surrounded by strangers in lab coats?" Maya shot him a sharp look, but Carla simply smiled. "That's one theory," she said, tapping her tablet. "Let's test it, shall we?" Without warning, Carla pushed a button on her device. The platform beneath Lucas emitted a sharp burst of energy. Lucas gasped, feeling a jolt run through his chest, like an electric shock that shot through his veins. "Are you trying to kill me?" he yelled, staggering back. "Relax, Lucas. It's just data," Maya said coolly, but her eyes narrowed as she watched his reaction closely. "Your body's response to stimuli is unlike anything we've seen before. This level of intensity, it's unusual. Lucas clenched his fists. What do you want from me? You're studying my reactions like I'm some experiment. His voice cracked, frustration building with each word. You can't just zap me and expect me to stay calm. You're mistaken if you think we're trying to harm you. Maya's voice was sharp now, though not without a trace of curiosity. We're trying to understand why humans react the way you do. There's so much potential in your species, so much that we don't yet grasp, and you, Lucas Ward, are the key to uncovering it. Lucas froze, staring at her. He felt the weight of her words settle into his bones. You don't even see me as a person, do you? I'm just a key to your study. His voice softened, though the bitterness remained. You think I'm some resource? Before Maya could respond, Alara stepped forward, her voice quiet but insistent. That's not true. We see you, Lucas. We see what makes you different, and we're trying to understand it. Lucas glanced at Alara, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. Her eyes were wide with something he hadn't expected. Concern, perhaps? Or was it compassion? Then maybe you should start treating me like a person, not a subject, Lucas said, his words firm but his heart pounding in his chest. Carla chuckled lightly, not missing the subtle tension building in the room. Oh, Lucas, you're not getting away that easily. But don't worry, we're not trying to hurt you. We're just intrigued. You have this fascinating ability to adapt, to respond to things in ways that don't make sense. Maybe it's just survival instincts kicking in, Lucas retorted, still feeling the aftershocks of the electric surge. Maya's gaze softened for a fraction of a second before she looked away, focusing on her readings. Perhaps. But there's something more here. Your heart rate, your body's reaction to physical proximity. It's unlike any other species we've encountered. You're different. Carla leaned in, her eyes scanning the data on her tablet. This could be groundbreaking. The way his biological markers change when he's near us. His pheromone levels increase dramatically when we're close. It's not just physical, it's emotional. Fascinating. Lucas looked between them, his mind whirling. You're saying I'm affecting you? Physically? Alara, Maya said abruptly, her voice suddenly cold again. Keep your distance. But it was too late. Alara, who had been standing too close to Lucas, looked down at the data pad in her hand with wide eyes. It's true. The biochemical readings, his pheromones, they're reacting with us. Lucas felt a shiver run through his spine. What the hell does that mean? He demanded, taking a step back. Carla didn't miss a beat. It means your presence is having an unpredictable effect on us. Something about you, your body, makes us react. It's like our biology is responding to yours on a level we didn't anticipate. Maya's expression hardened, but Lucas could see the conflict in her eyes. This is why we need to study you, Lucas. We can't afford to ignore these results. What if I don't want to be studied? Lucas's voice was a growl now, frustration bubbling to the surface. He could feel the walls closing in on him, the pressure building with every passing moment. You don't have a choice, Maya snapped, but the venom in her voice was tinged with something else, something uncertain. You're here now, and we're going to finish this for the greater good. I'm not your test subject, Lucas yelled, his pulse racing. He tried to push past them, but the platform hummed again, locking his feet in place. Alara reached out, her hand trembling slightly as she touched his arm. Please, just trust us, she whispered, her voice soft and sincere. Lucas looked at her, her green skin flushed with something he couldn't quite identify. Despite everything, there was a spark of humanity in her eyes that disarmed him. You want to understand me? He asked, his voice quieter now. Then start by seeing me, not just as your specimen, but as someone who wants to survive this madness. The room fell silent. For a moment, it felt as though time had stopped. Maya and Carla exchanged a look, and Alara's hand remained on his arm, her touch almost comforting despite the circumstances. Finally, Maya sighed, her voice cool once more. We'll see how this unfolds, Lucas. But I warn you, your journey here won't be easy. The silence in the room was thick, almost suffocating, as Lucas's words lingered in the air. The tension was palpable, and for a moment, it seemed like no one knew what to say next. Alara's hand was still on his arm, her touch light, but somehow grounding. It was an odd comfort amidst the chaos, and Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing, something beyond the experiments and the data. Maya was the first to break the silence, her voice cutting through the thick air. Enough. We've deviated from the protocol long enough. We need to continue. Lucas felt his pulse quicken at her cold tone. Continue what? Zapping me again? Probing me like I'm some object for your research? We are not trying to harm you, Lucas. Maya's voice remained calm, but there was an edge to it now. We're trying to understand. That's all. Carla, who had been quietly observing, suddenly perked up. Let's proceed with the next test. This time, we'll focus on empathy. We need to see how you respond to emotional cues. Lucas raised an eyebrow. Empathy? You want me to do some kind of emotional trick for you? It's not a trick, Carla replied, her tone light and teasing, but her eyes were filled with curiosity. It's a test of emotional intelligence. You're human, which means you must have some pretty complex feelings. We want to see how you connect with others. Fine, Lucas said, shrugging. Let's get this over with. He wasn't sure if he should be angry, scared, or curious. Probably all three. Maya gestured to a screen, and a series of holographic faces appeared before him. Some human, some distinctly alien. They each displayed different emotional expressions: joy, confusion, sadness, and more. Identify the emotions on the faces, Maya instructed, her voice more neutral now, almost clinical. Lucas studied the images for a moment. It was a test, but something about it felt personal. It was like he was being asked to lay bare his soul. But he pushed the thought away and focused on the task at hand. He began pointing to each face, describing the emotions with precision. That one's happiness. This one's frustration. That's anxiety. Impressive, Maya said, nodding slightly. You're fast. Most species take much longer. I've spent enough time in awkward social situations to know when people are lying, Lucas said, a wry smile creeping onto his face. He glanced at Alara, who was still close, her large eyes studying him with an intensity that was hard to ignore. I'm serious, Alara said softly, her voice almost a whisper. You're good at this, at understanding people. How do you do it? Lucas blinked, taken aback. I guess I just pay attention. It's not rocket science. There's more to it, Alara insisted, her voice filled with something he couldn't quite decipher. Your ability to sense emotions, to connect, it's not just logical, it's instinctive. You make people feel understood. Lucas paused, his heart unexpectedly pounding harder. Her words hit him in a way he didn't expect. He wasn't just a test subject to her, at least, not entirely. Something about this moment, the way she was looking at him, made him wonder if they were beginning to see him as more than just a specimen. Maya broke the moment, though, her voice commanding. Alara, focus. We need to move on to the next test. Lucas turned his attention back to the screen, but his mind kept drifting back to Alara's words. There was something about her, something different from the cold clinical demeanor of Maya or the playful curiosity of Carla. Alara's approach to him felt real. But what did that mean in a place like this, where everything was designed to be detached, to be observed without attachment? Carla tapped a few buttons and the next test appeared before Lucas, a series of abstract shapes spinning in 3D. Now, let's test your kinesthetic awareness, your ability to respond to physical movement. Lucas narrowed his eyes at the shapes. They were chaotic, shifting erratically. It felt like a test of reflexes. He raised his arms instinctively, guiding his hands through the air to catch the spinning shapes. His movements were fluid, almost automatic, owned by years of reflex training, boxing, sports, anything that required coordination. As he continued, he couldn't help but notice that the shapes seemed to react to his motions, speeding up or slowing down as if they were aware of his every move. You've got incredible reflexes, Carla marveled, clapping her hands as the shapes moved faster, a challenge that Lucas accepted without hesitation. Do you engage in physical activities often? Boxing, Lucas said, barely out of breath. Yoga on Sundays helps clear my head. Boxing, Maya repeated, intrigued. What's the appeal of that? It's not about the fighting, Lucas explained, his hands still catching the shapes. It's about discipline, focusing your mind, pushing your limits. Sometimes it's about fighting something inside of you, not just the opponent. Maya's gaze softened for just a moment, but she quickly masked it with her professional tone. Interesting, but let's move on. Alara watched him intently, her gaze never leaving him. Lucas noticed a faint blush spreading across her green cheeks when their eyes met. The sudden warmth in her skin didn't go unnoticed by him either. He wasn't sure if it was from the test or something else, but it lingered between them like an invisible thread, pulling them closer. "Next, we'll test your cognitive abilities," Maya said, her voice snapping back to business. A complicated holographic equation appeared before him, symbols twisting and turning in complex patterns. Lucas squinted at it, immediately recognizing the pattern as a multidimensional problem. He groaned. "Math, really?" "Not just any math," Maya said with a hint of challenge in her voice. "This is beyond the typical human capabilities. Let's see how you handle it." Lucas cracked his knuckles and dove into the problem. His mind was quick, calculating the variables and adjusting the equation in seconds. The symbols danced in his mind as he manipulated them with ease. Within moments, he solved the puzzle. "There's no way you're that fast," Carla gasped, staring at the screen in disbelief. "Impossible is my favorite kind of possible," Lucas said with a grin, feeling a rush of adrenaline from the challenge. He caught Maya's sharp look, but he couldn't help but enjoy the fact that he was outpacing their expectations. Maya's face remained impassive, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, a mix of frustration and awe. "We've never encountered a species like you." Before Lucas could respond, Elara stepped closer, her face serious now. "Lucas," she said, her voice almost pleading, "there's something about you. It's not just your intellect. There's a connection and energy between us." Lucas blinked, caught off guard by her words. "What do you mean by that?" "You're different. You're changing things here. Us, the way we think, the way we feel." Her voice softened, and for the first time, Lucas could see a crack in her composed exterior. "We never meant for this to happen. But I think you've affected all of us." The room was silent again, the air thick with the unspoken truth that Lucas wasn't just part of an experiment anymore. He was changing the way they all saw the universe. The atmosphere in the lab was growing heavy, thick with emotions that no one had expected. Lucas could feel the weight of the attention on him. Every move, every word was being scrutinized by the three alien women. But now, something more was happening, something he couldn't quite understand. Their proximity was starting to have a physical effect on him as much as it was on them. The last test, the one with the complex mathematics, was still fresh in his mind. He had expected to feel some satisfaction from solving it so quickly, but instead it left him uneasy. The puzzle had been too easy. It had felt almost like a setup, a distraction from something more profound. "Elara," Maya's voice broke through his thoughts. "Please step away from Lucas. We need to finish the final stage of the testing." Elara had been standing much too close to him, her gaze fixed on him with a strange intensity. Lucas couldn't help but notice the subtle flush of her skin, the way her breath seemed to hitch when their eyes met. Something had shifted, and it wasn't just about the experiment anymore. Elara didn't move immediately. Her eyes locked with Lucas's, and for a moment, the lab faded away. The hum of the machines, the sterile atmosphere, everything seemed distant. The only thing left was the connection between them, a spark that neither of them had anticipated. I can't," Elara whispered, her voice barely audible. "There's something about you, Lucas. I don't think I can just walk away." Lucas's heart raced. "What's happening to you?" he asked, his voice low. He had to know if it was just him or if they were both caught in something much deeper than the experiments they were conducting. Maya's voice interrupted, cutting through the tension. "Elara, don't make this more difficult than it already is. We have protocols to follow." "I can't just ignore what's happening," Elara shot back, her voice trembling. "Something is shifting in us, Maya. I'm feeling it too. Can't you see that?" Carla, who had been silently observing, finally spoke up. "She's right. We're all feeling it. I don't know what this is, but it's not just biochemical. It's emotional. I've never seen anything like it. The data," she gestured toward the screens displaying various readings, "it's off the charts." Maya looked between them, her eyes cold and calculating, but there was something in her gaze that suggested uncertainty. "This is unexpected, but we have no choice. We can't allow these feelings to interfere with the experiment. We must proceed." Lucas stood there, feeling the electric tension between them all. He was being pulled in every direction, his body betraying him, his mind racing with the need to escape. But what was there to escape from? Was he a subject to be studied, or was he something more to them? Alara, step away from him, Maya repeated, but there was no real force behind her words. It was as if she wasn't entirely sure herself anymore. But Alara didn't move. Instead, she took a tentative step closer to Lucas. The air between them seemed to crackle with an energy that Lucas couldn't explain. It wasn't just the proximity. It was as though their very being was aligned, connected on a level beyond the physical. "You don't understand," Alara said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "I've been studying humans, your species, for so long. But you, Lucas, you're unlike anything I've ever seen. Your emotions are raw, unpredictable. But at the same time, there's a beauty to it, a depth that I can't ignore. It's like nothing I've ever felt before." Lucas swallowed hard, his pulse pounding in his ears. He could feel it too, this connection, this pull that was drawing them closer. He wasn't just part of an experiment anymore. They weren't just studying him. They were starting to feel something they couldn't control. Maya turned to Carla, her voice tight with command. "Record this, Carla. We can't ignore the data. But we're not deviating from the protocol. Keep the emotional responses in check." Carla nodded, but her face betrayed a sense of hesitation. "I understand, Maya, but I don't think any of us can control this anymore. We're all part of this experiment, but it's not just science anymore. It's personal." There was a long pause before Maya spoke again, her tone almost softer. "You're right, Carla, but we can't allow it to interfere with the integrity of our research. This is about understanding the nature of human emotions, not feelings." "But isn't it the feelings that make us who we are?" Alara asked, her voice quiet but defiant. "Isn't that what makes us alive?" Maya's lips tightened, but she didn't respond. Instead, she turned back to the data screens, her eyes scanning the results, the readings flashing with patterns and numbers that meant nothing to Lucas, but everything to them. "Prepare the final phase," Maya said after a long silence. "We need to understand how far this connection goes." Lucas wasn't sure what she meant by the final phase, but his instincts told him it was something far more invasive, far more personal than anything that had come before. And Alara, her touch, her words, kept pulling him back to a place he didn't understand, a place that felt like he was losing control. "Alara," Lucas said, his voice strained, "we need to stop this. Whatever this is, it's not just an experiment anymore. I'm not a specimen. I'm a person." Alara hesitated, her eyes flickering between him and the others. But then, in a quiet, almost imperceptible gesture, she stepped closer again. "I know," she whispered, her hand brushing against his. The touch was electric, like fire against his skin. In that moment, Lucas realized, whatever this was, whatever was happening to them, it wasn't something that could be controlled. The experiment had already gone beyond its original intent, and now they were all caught in something that none of them could escape. The lab had grown uncomfortably silent. The once sterile, emotionless atmosphere felt suffocating now, as if the air itself was thick with the weight of unspoken truths. Lucas's heart was pounding in his chest, each beat sinking with the feeling that something was about to shatter. Something fundamental. Alara was standing just inches away from him, her hand still lingering near his arm, her fingers brushing against his skin. The contact was electric, charged with something that went far beyond any test they had conducted. Lucas could see the conflict in her eyes, her professional detachment warring with the undeniable pull she felt toward him. The same pull he felt toward her. "I don't understand," Lucas said, his voice barely above a whisper, but it was thick with the weight of his confusion. "Why is this happening? Why is this different?" Alara looked away briefly, as if she were struggling to find the words. "I don't know, Lucas. All I know is that we've been studying humans for so long, and I've never felt anything like this. I never expected to feel it with you." She stepped closer, her face inches from his, her breath warm against his skin. Lucas could see the vulnerability in her eyes, the uncertainty in her movements. It was as if she was just as lost in this connection as he was. Maya's sharp voice cut through the tension. "Enough." Her command was firm, but it didn't have the usual force behind it. There was something softer there, something beneath the surface. "We can't let this interfere with the research. This must remain scientific." Carla, who had been quietly watching, stepped forward, her expression a mix of intrigue and concern. Maya, I think the research is already interfered with. This is beyond us now. It's beyond science. The words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Lucas felt the weight of their gaze on him, and for the first time he realized how much they were all affected, how much he had changed everything about their work, their lives, their expectations. This wasn't just about studying human behavior. This was something bigger. This was about them, about emotions and connections, and the unexpected consequences of crossing boundaries that were never meant to be crossed. I don't think we can just study this anymore, Lucas said, his voice low and thoughtful. We're all caught in something we don't fully understand, and maybe that's the point. Maybe we're not meant to control it. Maya turned sharply to look at him, her eyes narrowing. You're talking about breaking the experiment, Lucas. That's not something we can afford. Maybe we can't afford not to break it, Lucas shot back, frustration creeping into his voice. You wanted to study me, to study humanity, but you're not seeing the bigger picture. You can't just control people like you're observing lab rats. We feel, we live. For a moment, there was silence again, this time heavy and uncertain. Alara, her eyes flickering between Lucas and Maya, spoke quietly. He's right, Maya. This connection isn't something we can simply disregard. It's real. We're all feeling it, whether we want to admit it or not. Maya's face was hard, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. This is dangerous, she whispered. You don't understand? The council? She cut herself off, her gaze shifting to the data screens in front of them. The readings had spiked, every single metric they had been monitoring now off the charts. Carla stepped up beside Lucas, her voice suddenly laced with urgency. What do we do now, Maya? This is no longer just data. It's something else. Maya clenched her fists, her entire body tense as she tried to maintain control. We finished the research. We stick to the protocol. We cannot let this emotional disruption affect the outcome. We can't. But Alara wasn't listening. She took a step forward, her face determined. No, Maya, we can't finish it. Not like this. She turned to Lucas, her hand gently touching his arm again, and the gesture sent a shiver through his body. I think I know what's happening, but I don't think we can stop it. The more we try to hold this back, the more it's going to unravel everything. The data is telling us one thing, but our instincts, our hearts, are telling us another. Lucas looked at her, his mind racing. There was no way to explain what had been building between them, between all of them. It was as if their very beings were now intertwined, and that wasn't something that could be quantified or measured on a screen. It was real. We can't just ignore this, Lucas said, his voice quiet but resolute. If this is what we're really feeling, then we need to face it. Not as scientists, not as specimens, but as people. Maya's expression faltered. For the first time, Lucas saw a crack in her otherwise impenetrable exterior. She was caught between her duty and her growing awareness that something profound had been ignited between them. The data no longer mattered. It was the emotions, the connections that were changing everything. Carla, sensing the shift, stepped forward. Maybe we should stop trying to control it, she said softly. Maybe we should let it unfold, see where it takes us. We've studied everything. Now it's time to experience it for ourselves. The words hung in the air, heavy and bold. Lucas couldn't believe it. In that moment, he wasn't just the subject of their study. He was a participant in something bigger than all of them. They were all in this together now, bound by something they couldn't explain or understand, but something that was undeniably real. Maya was silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on Lucas. The room seemed to pulse with an energy they couldn't control. Finally, she sighed, her shoulders slumping with the weight of her decision. I can't stop this, she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. We can't stop it. But that doesn't mean we have to let it destroy everything. Alara smiled softly, her eyes meeting Lucas's. It was a look of understanding, of something more than just a scientific breakthrough. It was a connection that neither of them had asked for, but neither of them could deny anymore. You were right, Alara said quietly. We need to let it unfold. And maybe, just maybe, it's the only way we'll ever truly understand each other. The lab had grown uncomfortably silent. The once sterile, emotionless atmosphere felt suffocating now, as if the air itself was thick with the weight of unspoken truths. Lucas's heart was pounding in his chest, each beat sinking with the feeling that something was about to shatter, something fundamental. Elara was standing just inches away from him, her hands still lingering near his arm, her fingers brushing against his skin. The contact was electric, charged with something that went far beyond any test they had conducted. Lucas could see the conflict in her eyes, her professional detachment warring with the undeniable pull she felt toward him. The same pull he felt toward her. "I don't understand," Lucas said, his voice barely above a whisper, but it was thick with the weight of his confusion. "Why is this happening? Why is this different?" Elara looked away briefly, as if she were struggling to find the words. "I don't know, Lucas. All I know is that we've been studying humans for so long, and I've never felt anything like this. I never expected to feel it with you." She stepped closer, her face inches from his, her breath warm against his skin. Lucas could see the vulnerability in her eyes, the uncertainty in her movements. It was as if she was just as lost in this connection as he was. Maya's sharp voice cut through the tension. "Enough." Her command was firm, but it didn't have the usual force behind it. There was something softer there, something beneath the surface. "We can't let this interfere with the research. This must remain scientific." Carla, who had been quietly watching, stepped forward, her expression a mix of intrigue and concern. "Maya, I think the research is already interfered with. This is beyond us now. It's beyond science." The words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Lucas felt the weight of their gaze on him, and for the first time, he realized how much they were all affected, how much he had changed everything about their work, their lives, their expectations. This wasn't just about studying human behavior. This was something bigger. This was about them, about emotions and connections and the unexpected consequences of crossing boundaries that were never meant to be crossed. "I don't think we can just study this anymore," Lucas said, his voice low and thoughtful. "We're all caught in something we don't fully understand, and maybe that's the point. Maybe we're not meant to control it." Maya turned sharply to look at him, her eyes narrowing. "You're talking about breaking the experiment, Lucas. That's not something we can afford." "Maybe we can't afford not to break it," Lucas shot back, frustration creeping into his voice. "You wanted to study me, to study humanity. But you're not seeing the bigger picture. You can't just control people like you're observing lab rats. We feel, we live." For a moment there was silence again, this time heavy and uncertain. Elara, her eyes flickering between Lucas and Maya, spoke quietly. "He's right, Maya. This connection isn't something we can simply disregard. It's real. We're all feeling it, whether we want to admit it or not." Maya's face was hard, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. "This is dangerous," she whispered. "You don't understand. The Council." She cut herself off, her gaze shifting to the data screens in front of them. The readings had spiked, every single metric they had been monitoring now off the charts. Carla stepped up beside Lucas, her voice suddenly laced with urgency. "What do we do now, Maya? This is no longer just data. It's something else." Maya clenched her fists, her entire body tense as she tried to maintain control. "We finished the research. We stick to the protocol. We cannot let this emotional disruption affect the outcome. We can't." But Elara wasn't listening. She took a step forward, her face determined. "No, Maya, we can't finish it. Not like this." She turned to Lucas, her hand gently touching his arm again, and the gesture sent a shiver through his body. "I think I know what's happening, but I don't think we can stop it. The more we try to hold this back, the more it's going to unravel everything. The data is telling us one thing, but our instincts, our hearts, are telling us another." Lucas looked at her, his mind racing. There was no way to explain what had been building between them, between all of them. It was as if their very beings were now intertwined, and that wasn't something that could be quantified or measured on a screen. It was real. "We can't just ignore this," Lucas said, his voice quiet but resolute. "If this is what we're really feeling, then we need to face it. Not as scientists, not as specimens, but as people." Maya's expression faltered. For the first time, Lucas saw a crack in her otherwise impenetrable exterior. She was caught between her duty and her growing awareness that something profound had been ignited between them. The data no longer mattered. It was the emotions, the connections that were changing everything. Carla, sensing the shift, stepped forward. "Maybe we should stop trying to control it," she said softly. "Maybe we should let it unfold, see where it takes us. We've studied everything. Now it's time to experience it for ourselves." The words hung in the air, heavy and bold. Lucas couldn't believe it. In that moment, he wasn't just the subject of their study. He was a participant in something bigger than all of them. They were all in this together now, bound by something they couldn't explain or understand, but something that was undeniably real. Maya was silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on Lucas. The room seemed to pulse with an energy they couldn't control. Finally, she sighed, her shoulders slumping with the weight of her decision. "I can't stop this," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. "We can't stop it, but that doesn't mean we have to let it destroy everything." Alara smiled softly, her eyes meeting Lucas's. It was a look of understanding, of something more than just a scientific breakthrough. It was a connection that neither of them had asked for, but neither of them could deny anymore. "You were right," Alara said quietly. "We need to let it unfold, and maybe, just maybe, it's the only way we'll ever truly understand each other." The lab was quiet now, the only sound the soft hum of the machinery around them. The tension had dissipated somewhat, replaced by an almost reverent stillness as the reality of what they had just acknowledged settled into place. Lucas stood at the center, surrounded by the three women, Alara, Maya, and Carla. Each of them had changed, visibly altered by what they had experienced, what they had felt. They were no longer just scientists and a subject. They were something more. The data screens continued to flicker, their readings still displaying anomalies that none of them could explain. The equations they had meticulously crafted, the tests they had conducted, all of it now seemed insignificant. What had started as a cold, clinical examination had evolved into something far beyond their control, a force none of them could define, but all of them could feel. Lucas looked at Alara, her green skin now glowing softly under the lab's lights, her eyes filled with a mix of wonder and uncertainty. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice low but steady. Alara's lips parted slightly, as though she had been waiting for that question. She took a step closer, her hand brushing against his once more. A spark of connection that seemed to resonate through every fiber of his being. "I don't know," she whispered, her voice filled with both awe and hesitation. "We've crossed a line, Lucas, a line we can't go back from." Maya, who had been silent for a while, finally spoke. Her voice was softer now, no longer the sharp command it had once been. "We're in uncharted territory," she admitted. "This isn't about data or protocols anymore. This, whatever this is between us, it's bigger than us, bigger than anything we've ever studied. We don't know what it means for our species, for yours. We don't even know what will happen next." Carla stepped forward, her eyes bright with curiosity, but there was an edge of something else beneath the surface, something deeper. "Maybe it's time to stop trying to control it. Maybe we let it lead us wherever it's going." Lucas nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He could sense it too, the pull of something far greater than all their experiments combined. Whatever had started in that lab, whatever connections had been forged, wasn't something that could be quantified or measured. It was something that could only be experienced, felt in the deepest parts of their beings, and perhaps that was enough. "We don't know what the future holds," Lucas said, his voice firm but filled with resolve. "But whatever happens, we're in this together now. This isn't just about science anymore. It's about us, our choices, our connections, our willingness to step into the unknown." Maya met his gaze, her eyes searching, but there was a softness in them now. "You're right," she said quietly. "We've spent so long trying to understand the universe, but maybe the real discovery is understanding each other." For a moment, the four of them stood there, the weight of their words hanging in the air. They were at a crossroads, a point where the future was uncertain, where the path forward could lead anywhere. There was no manual for this, no protocol to follow. All they had was the bond that had formed between them, a bond that defied logic and reason, a bond that had shattered the walls they had once built between themselves and the unknown. Alara glanced at the screens one last time, her eyes flicking over the readings with a sense of wonder. "The data is still there," she said, her voice filled with a strange kind of peace. But it doesn't matter anymore. Not like it used to. Lucas smiled, a weight lifting from his shoulders. Maybe the only thing that matters now is what we do next. With that, they turned toward the exit of the lab, stepping into the unknown together. The door slid open, and for the first time since he had woken up in this strange world, Lucas felt a sense of freedom. The future was unwritten, a vast expanse of possibilities stretching before them, and they had the power to shape it. As they left the lab, the soft hum of the doors closing behind them felt like the final chapter of one story in the beginning of another. A story that was no longer defined by experiments and data, but by the connections they had made, the bond they had formed, and the uncertainty of the journey ahead. This open-ended conclusion feels like a powerful and fitting way to wrap up the story. It leaves the characters and the readers wondering about the future, what choices they will make, and how their connections will evolve. It invites the possibility of growth, unexpected shifts, and challenges ahead. If you're considering sequels or expanding the narrative, you could explore the consequences of their emotional bond, whether it becomes a source of strength or tension, or if it draws them into larger conflicts or revelations. There's also room to delve into the broader implications of their choices on their respective worlds and species, and the ripple effects that such a profound connection could have. If you want, we can brainstorm possible directions for future chapters, or explore specific details or themes you'd like to develop. Would you like to pursue any of these ideas further, or leave the ending as a starting point for future possibilities?